guys, we got a little test going on here. Every time I paint a body, after I apply the paint, I wet sand the entire body to smooth all the paint out. And I wet sand all the way up to 12,000 to get it as smooth as possible. And then I polish the paint out before I apply the clear. Making sure to wash the entire body off to get any residue off, because you don't want to trap any residue underneath your clear. Now what I have here is my test MR2 body that I used as a color test for the Fiero build I'm doing. And I applied a new paint. I don't remember the name. I'll find it and I'll put it up on the screen. It was okay. Wasn't 100% thrilled with this paint, but I mean, it worked. So, but that's not the point of this video, because I'm getting off track here. My point is it necessary to really sand everything down to 12,000 and then polish the paint out before you apply your clear? As you can see here, the trunk lid, I've smoothed and polished out completely. I did have the hood polished out, but for this experiment, I decided to wet sand it to smooth it out a little bit more and leave it without polishing. So what you see is the majority of the body has just been wet sanded to be much smoother than what it was, but it's not been polished out at all, which is why it looks so dull. While the trunk lid has been completely polished out. The engine cover there, I didn't even bother doing anything to. As I said, this is just a test, so I'm not getting crazy with every little nook and cranny. But we're going to see what the difference is from the polished paint to just the wet sanded paint after we apply the clear. I'm going to put the clear on the same way I do with every car that I paint, which is going to be 2 light coats, 1 wet coat. Let it sit for 3 days before we do anything with it. And the clear is going to be sprayed from a can. I'm going to be using Tamiya clear, as it is my favorite clear up to this point. I've never cleared with an airbrush, so that may be a future test for those of us who are still new to the airbrush game. As far as painting bodies, anyway. I can do all sorts of detail work with an airbrush, but painting bodies, I'm still looking to improve. This body was painted with an airbrush, and I got good coverage, but it really didn't come out as nice as I wanted to, which I'm not sure if it was me or the paint. But I'm really wasn't happy with the way it came out, which why, after all the smoothing and cleaning up of the paint, actually got a pretty decent result, as you can see with the polishing here. So let's get to clearing it, and we'll see what happens. Now we're at the paint booth. What I like to do beforehand is when I'm painting, especially when I'm applying clear, is I usually reline the entire paint booth when I'm doing a body with all new paper. I'm not going to do that now, as like I said, this is just a test. I'm not really that worried about getting dirt in the clear, as I just want to see what the clarity of the paint is after I clear it. And that's basically why we're doing this. Now, after relining it, what I do is I take a spray bottle of water and I wet down as soon as, okay, let's build up a little pressure in the spray bottle. Okay. Yeah, this sometimes takes a little bit to get the water up there. But what I like to do is I spray down the entire booth to just keep any loose dust. Well, let's just pretend that this is working. Usually this doesn't give me this much trouble. Okay, hold on a second, guys. Okay, there we go. Now we're getting something out of here. I spray down the entire booth with a little bit of water. Not enough so that it's dripping off of everything, but just enough to moisten the entire area and prevent any loose dust from being kicked up as you're spraying. Because as you know, when you spray with a can as opposed to an airbrush, the repellent comes out at a much faster rate, and that can kick up a lot of dust. There we go. So now we have the entire booth is now wet down. I'm a little more thorough than that usually, but like I said, we're just an abbreviated test. And now, if I can remember where I put the body of the car that I just wanted to paint, let's go on that hunt and see if we can find it. And as I just knocked something over. Okay, I'm gonna have to go for a second while I try and remember where I put it. Okay, found it. It's only right in front of me. All right, so let's get one good look before the test. You can see the reflection of the light is very dull in the paint, where here the reflection of the light is very sharp, and you can see me. So we're going to see what the difference is going to be. And that'll answer the question, is it really necessary to polish the paint before you clear it? At least that's a question I've always been asking myself, as that's the process I've always used, and I've never really tried it any other way. So, unless, of course, the paint lays really smooth, in which case then I don't bother with the wet sanding, and I wet sand on the clear only and not the color coat. So I guess this is going to be a question of, is wet sanding the color coat really necessary if you lay down a smooth paint job, and can you just clear over that? Or does it really make a difference? So we're going to find out. Okay, now, another thing that I like to do in my paint preparation is I have a small space heater here. And what I use that for is to heat my cans of paint. Because when you heat them up, they spray a little finer. And the heat sort of causes the paint to atomize a little bit better as it's coming out of the can. At least that's the way I describe it. And it lays a little bit finer and lays a little smoother. So let's see what happens. I'm probably just as curious as you guys are at this point, if you're curious at all. I mean, I am. I don't know about you guys, but I am. So I want to know what's going to happen. All right, let me set the camera up, and then we'll get to spraying. Now, I always like to go over with a little tack cloth just to get any remaining dust particles off of the car. Put some light dusting with it. Experiment. The car is now fully dried and cured. I have gone over it and polished and sanded wet sanded and polished the clear coat. So now we're going to see the result, and that'll answer the question of, is it really necessary to wet sand and polish your paint before clear, or will just concentrating all your efforts on the clear with some minor wet sanding of the paint give you just as good a result? So let's take a close-up look and see. Now, here we have the rear, which is the trunk lid, not the engine lid, but the trunk lid was wet sanded on the paint, and then the paint was polished. So I wet sanded the paint from 3 to 12K, and then I polished the paint before applying the clear. that laid very smooth and very clean. So then I decided, well, then I'm just going to wet sand up to 3000 grit and then polish and wax the clear. Now, I did my wet sanding throughout this whole test with the Meguiar's Ultimate Compound, followed by Tamiya Fine Compound, and then Tamiya Finishing Compound, and then topped off with a Meguiar's Paste Wax. Now, the tool I used for polishing is my Keshi rotary tool with polishing and buffing pads on it. Now, after that, I would go in and do the final polish by hand using all the aforementioned products again to get a smooth finish and eliminate all of the micro scratches, or as many of them as I could. So as you can see here, the paint that was polished and wet sanded and polished, I'm sorry, and then cleared and then wet sanded and polished again, does give you a beautiful reflection. Let's see how we look here. As you can see, it's like a mirror. It's reflecting everything super clear, super sharp. So as expected, all of the extra preparation that went into the paint gave us a beautiful result. You can see the reflection is so sharp that you can actually see all of the ridges in the bottle cap. So yes, all of that extra effort does pay off. Now, let's take a look at the other side. This is the hood, which was wet sanded to 3000 grit on the paint without polishing the paint. And then we went ahead and polished the hood. Well, we wet sanded and polished. We wet sanded the hood from 3 to 12K and then polished it with all the previously mentioned products. And this is the result we have. Even without going through the extra effort of polishing the paint before clearing, we have a result that's just as good as the trunk lid where we polished it before clearing. It's smooth, it's flat. It gives a beautiful reflection. Let's bring her over here and we'll see what we see. There we go. We can see the reflection of the Alexa in the paint. So basically, they are just about identical. The quality of the reflection in the paint. So I guess the result of this little test is that you really don't have to polish out your paint before clear coating. Now this may be old news, or maybe all you guys that have a lot more experience with this and have been painting for a lot longer have known this, but a lot of us here who haven't really given that much thought, I thought that we'd like to see what the result of this, of an actual test of this theory, what the result would be. And if it saves us a little time in our model building, so that we don't have to prep the paint so much. And I've already got some smudges on here, so this is not even as clean as it could be, and it still looks amazing. So this really can save us quite a bit of time in our model building, because you're not spending so much time prepping and sanding and polishing the paint before you clear, and you're saving most of that, and when you're using that time on the clear itself instead of on the paint, and still getting a deep rich shine. So I may be modifying my painting method, which could shorten the time on my builds, as I won't be spending all this time polishing the paint out before applying the clear, as just wet sanding it, as you can see by the results here, is enough to give you a great quality finish. Again, the trunk lid, the paint was wet sanded and polished before clear, and then the clear was wet sanded and polished. The hood, the paint was wet sanded to 3000 grit and then cleared over the paint without polishing it out. And then the clear was wet sanded from 3 to 12,000 grit. And as you can see, the finish looks amazing either way. So there you go, guys. That was just a little experiment. Hopefully I didn't confuse everybody with trying to recall exactly what I did. That's why I wrote everything on the body, because there's no way I was going to remember which one I polished or didn't polish, unless I wrote it all down. But I figured you guys would be interested in this little test, as it was something that I've been thinking about for a little while. And since I've gotten back into the hobby, I just didn't know whether wet sanding the paint before clear and polishing it before, wet sanding and polishing the paint before clear, I thought was a standard practice, and I didn't really know whether just applying the clear after wet sanding would be enough to give me a good finish. And as you can see here, yes it is. So I think from here on out, I will be just applying my paint, wet sanding it, and then applying my clear, as it still looks just as good, I think, as the other way of doing it. But if you want to do it the other way too, yeah, that's fine, because all the extra effort really is not going to hurt. Alright guys, that's it for this little test. I hope I haven't confused you all, like I think I've confused myself a little bit. And maybe you'll find some interesting information here. Alright, that's going to be it, and I will see you guys on the next one.